There was a magic ability that was introduced very early on in the Black Clover series, and it might be one of the most versatile tools for any mage. And it makes Black Clover characters that much more broken whenever they are pitted into fights with characters from other fictional universes. This ability has only been used by a confirmed 4 characters in the series, but based on lore and how the power system works, the vast majority of any relevant fighter would have it as well. And this ability is called a Mana Force Field. What is a Mana Force Field? A Mana Force Field is created around a mage whenever their magic power is considered very powerful, and their effect is tremendous. They have 2 main effects. If a spell is cast by a significantly weaker mage in the area, the spell will be straight up erased. Not only that, but it will make the mage struggle to even control their magic. Basically, a Mana Force Field has 2 separate ways of power nullification effects. As far as I can tell, these were first referenced in the fight against Patri in the cave, when Finral says that Patri is so strong that he can create Mana Force Fields around him, and this is later confirmed when his magic power would be unsealed and just his raw magic power would nullify one of Jack's slashes. This is later confirmed to be a Mana Force Field later on by Finral, and these are natural occurrences. The mage doesn't have to consciously think to make them. It is just practically how mana, or magic power, works in the Black Clover universe. In the next arc, we would see Veto make Mana Force Fields as well, as it would be directly stated that his magic power would erase the average attack spell from a mage just by existing. And that was Veto's base magic power, and he was still holding back. And then, when he was going self-destruct mode, it was stated by Vanessa that just his raw magic power was so strong that it began to erase her threads. After the Veto fight, we get Fauna, whose magic power was so strong that she completely erased Vanessa's threads and made it so that Finral could not even control his magic. Which, remember, Finral could use his spatial magic against Third Eye Veto's Mana Force Fields, but against Third Eye Fauna, he was reduced to this. More confirmation that Fauna is in fact stronger than Veto. In the Elf Saga, the Compass Mage, with this French-ass name that I can't pronounce, would be turned into the Elf Kevin. It was stated that her magic power was so strong that Solid could not even hit her with his spells, all thanks to her Mana Force Field. So that's at least 4 characters who are confirmed to directly have power nullification based upon their heightened magic power, creating Mana Force Fields. But a lot of times when I bring this up to people, I've seen them attempt to argue that Mana Force Fields should be purely exclusive to these characters because it hasn't been stated otherwise. But I don't find this to be the most logical approach. It is directly stated that those with strong enough magic power will produce Mana Force Fields. Furthermore, human mages, or even elven mages for that matter, aren't the only ones who can produce Mana Force Fields. The world itself does. That's right, it's directly stated by the Wizard King that grand magic regions like the Seabed Temple or the Jotun Volcano produce Mana Force Fields. And this actually makes sense, because what makes a grand magic region different from your average national park? And the difference is, they are hotbeds of nature's mana. There is so much condensed magical energy that it produces Mana Force Fields in grand magic regions, just like when there is so much magical energy condensed into a human or elven mage. So if we pair these 2 statements, that means that literally anyone with strong enough magic power creates Mana Force Fields. We don't know the floor of this power, like we don't know the absolute bare minimum magic power that you need, but at the very least, if you have power comparable to base Patri in the cave arc, you can create them naturally. There's actually some other events that happen in the manga that make me believe that they are actually still being used later on. They just weren't directly named because they're not really needing to be named if Tabata already introduced these concepts so early in the series. In the Spade Saga, when Dante defeated Asta, he sees Vanessa using her fate power to save the Black Bulls, and he gets angry because that's supposed to be his woman. He simply raises his magic power from 50 to 60%, and then poof, all of Vanessa's magic power is gone. But this is not all a cut and clean feat. At the time, Dante did have his spell, Presence of the Demon King, active, so this could just be a function of his spell. However, all he does is increase his magic power from 50 to 60%, and then it nullifies all of her magic power by forcefully expending it. It's very minor supporting evidence that, pretty much any character can have Mana Force Fields, but it's evidence nonetheless. Another example, and in my opinion a better example, is the Ancient Demon from the Spade Kingdom. Specifically, the one that attacked the Clover Kingdom. Shortly after it appeared inside of the Clover Kingdom's borders, the Ancient Demon would march through while facing off against a bunch of different magic knights, including a combined effort of Kaiser and many of his squad mates. He used his Vortex magic, which is power nullification, and he spawned it on the demon. But it really didn't do much. And we would later get a statement from Julius that the Ancient Demon is a mass of supercharged magic power that repels all spells in existence. With everything that we know about the series and Mana Force Fields, this should mean that the reason why the Ancient Demon was doing this is because of its Mana Force Fields nullifying the magic of everybody else. Later on in the Spade Saga, Longus would fight Xenon, and Xenon's bones were able to pierce through Longris's offensive spatial magic, which is supposed to erase space. Like the databook says that Longris carves through the universe itself. We do know that the magic power difference here is pretty huge, Xenon being way more powerful than Longris. Does this mean that Xenon was able to go through the spatial erasure because the mana force fields that he would naturally be producing? I think it's possible. I think there is a caveat to this that we'll get to later on, and that is that Mana Skin helps you resist Mana Force Fields. Mana Zone has a much more advanced Mana Skin, and Longris is using Mana Zone here, so Mana Force Field should be pretty mitigated by Longris, but we'll get to that later. Finally, there is Xenon's Absolute Space, which is stated to allow him to take control of the mana of anyone inside of his space. But then he lists 3 weaknesses. 1. Those who have an equivalent amount of magic power or higher. 2. Those who are beloved by mana and can free themselves. And 3. Spatial mages who use Mana Zone. You could make the argument that the reason why the first one works is because that means that they would have mana force fields that would be strong enough to resist Xenon's absolute space. As I said, I think things like this are possible to be the case. The series has given a few ways to resist mana force fields. The very basic one is just be strong. And what that means is essentially to have a higher magic power. Think about it like this. Vedo's mana force fields were not strong enough to nullify Finral's spells, but Fauna's were. This is because Finral was closer in magic power to Vedo than he was to Fauna. As I already mentioned, Mana Skin is a technique that helps tremendously with mana force fields, as they make it much easier for a mage to travel through the mana force fields of Grand Magic regions. Though, keep in mind that every Magic Knight uses Mana Skin, which should imply that Solid had one, but that still didn't matter, whereas Noel's polished Mana Skin was able to work inside of Kavin's mana force fields. What is Mana Skin? So Mana Skin actually does multiple things. Not only does it protect a mage from the power nullification of mana force fields, but it also protects the user from harsh environments, like the extreme heat of the Jotun volcano or the extreme cold of Edward's absolute zero temperatures in the movie. But that's not all that Mana Skin does. It also increases the magic power of the user. As in the manga, it states that the Mana Skin increases the physical capabilities of the wielder. And we know that if one increases their magic power, their physical abilities are increased as well, because they are reinforced by magic further. And based on these 2 statements from the databook and light novel, using Mana Skin involves taking the residual mana of nature to form the layer of the skin, channeling that additional concentrated energy. I think this is why Mana Skin is so effective against mana force fields, as it is essentially 2 birds with 1 stone. Mana Skin increases their power, which would lessen the effects of the mana force fields, but then it also gives them a layer of protection that wards off the nullification effects. Not completely, but at least to some degree. Now, I believe you could argue that mana force fields would be weak to power nullification, as they are constructs made of mana. But in the case of the Ancient Demon, who I made the case for likely having mana force fields, faced off against Kaiser's Vortex power nullification magic, and he resisted it quite well. Because of that, I think that abilities similar to Mana Skin would help a character be able to resist mana force fields, but they would need to have a very potent, likely layered level of power nullification to work on mana force fields. And I think that most people know that the vast majority of the cast, and pretty much any relevant fighter in Black Clover, has long surpassed Patri. Even characters like Gordon and Magna have greater magic power than Patri, meaning they should have mana force fields. And just think about what that means. One of the most popular discussions is Gojo versus various Black Clover characters. Well, now, he can't even beat Gordon. Gordon was strong enough to one-shot a golem that was stronger than this version of Black Asta, and that Black Asta had already grown stronger since the Elf Arc, where he was comparable to Elven Apostles, giving Gordon well above planetary attack potency, and Gordon's magic power would be much higher than Gojo's curse energy, and therefore, his mana force fields would nullify Gojo's infinity, and because Gordon is way stronger and faster than Gojo, he could one-shot him. Sister Teresa also would show Sukuna who the greatest sorcery in history truly was. I actually think that mana force fields are a very interesting aspect of the Black Clover power system, and it makes so much sense narratively. Remember how much it is drilled into our heads that magic is everything, and just by simply having high magic power, a trait of nobles and royals, they get to produce natural force fields that automatically nullify the spells of their opponents, at least their weaker opponents. Whereas in a normal scenario, their weaker opponents could have unique spells that they worked hard to make, but it wouldn't matter because of the mana force fields. This further shows the dynamic between those that are born with talent and those that work hard, as in order to fight a royal or a noble, a commoner would need to train even harder to acquire Mana Skin, just to help them launch their spells inside of a noble or royal's mana force field. I think that the way that Tabata developed this ability is rather interesting, as if you look at other series, there are some where just having the higher power than the opponent allows them to nullify or heavily resist hacks of a weaker opponent, and typically the only reason given is just simply a power difference. Whereas Tabata adds a whole new phenomena to both the mage and the world. When mana grows too dense, a force field is created. It is an incredibly interesting aspect of the series that I wonder if Tabata will ever expand more on or mention again directly. Though, I'm not sure it's necessarily needed, because he's already put a lot into it already. Again, it's multiple characters. It's built into the actual lore and the power system because you have Grand Magic regions having it. That's why Grand Magic regions are so strong. But anyways, guys, that was it for the video. If you guys don't know, what I am now doing is whenever I do streams, I'm having super chat goals. And if we reach the super chat goals, I am doing extra videos for that month. So this is an extra video thanks to these people who super chatted. So thanks to them and thanks to everybody for the support. I'll be doing more streams. If you want to get more videos from me, you can always just help the channel that way. But with that being said, you can join my Discord and follow me on Twitter. Thanks for the support, everybody. Hope you all have an amazing day. Peace out.